All right, so let's just go through over a couple of questions. As usual, Wentworth Miller, and we're going to start with this question, which is on page 845. Question 7 on page 845. So this is the same thing we had from previous weeks. It's always the Wentworth Miller method, identifying the parties, identifying their objectives, the premises, and then the elements of these premises and finding the legal issues. Okay? So once you have done the legal issues, you can go and work on ILAC. All right. So let's start with this question. It says, some 4 months after the closure of his account, and knowing that there were no funds in it, B thought that he would try his card in his bank's automatic teller machine, the ATM, for fun, when passing it with some friends. So he inserted the card in the ATM, keyed in his personal identification number, the PIN number, and requested $200. To his amazement, the ATM paid him this amount because the machine was temporarily not online to the bank's central computer and had been programmed to pay up this $200 to any person who had a card and correctly entered their PIN. When offline, the machine was incapable of determining whether the cardholder had an account that remained current, and if so, whether the account was in credit. Our question is, has been committed any offense? So again, we start, before we go into this offense business, let's just start with the basics. If this is going to go to court, assuming that there is an offense, who is going to take whom to court?
The bank would like to take the withdrawee out.
Okay, so B. Okay, so the bank versus B. What does the bank want? Of course, the $200 back. What does B want? To keep the $200, or at least not be punished. Okay. So, what kind of premise you reckon we're going to look at in such a situation? Is there anything around stealing here? No? Yes?
I personally think so, considering it wasn't his money to begin with, considering he didn't have that money, he was not entitled to that money,
Okay.
he therefore took money which belonged to the bank.
So, the definition of stealing is what? It's about property, right? And it's not yours. And you've taken that from someone else. So, you think we can build some case around that kind of argument, that B stole from the bank? No. Someone says no. Why not?
He only went by what he believed he thought he had. He does not know that that is not his money. As far as he's concerned, it came out of his account, therefore it is his money.
Okay, so someone's saying, is there a guilty mind here? Did he actually want to steal anything?
He says that knowing that there were no funds.
Okay, so when you are writing an answer or when you're arguing, you can see that it says that he knew that there were no funds. So why did he put his card in the ATM? For fun. So for fun, does that mean he intended actually to steal something? Yes.
There was no intention to steal.
Yeah.
But once the money came out,
Uh-huh.
once he took it, I think that
Okay.
creates the steal.
So, when do you have to acquire the guilty mind? Did B, let's assume that this is a crime, all right? Let's assume it's a crime. You have to have some sort of a fault, mental element. Did he have the mental element when he inserted the card into the ATM? Why? Someone says no, because this was for fun. Okay. So, it came out. $200 came out. Now, what now? Does he now have a guilty mind?
It's guilty if he holds on to it, but not if he gives it back.
Yeah. So, once he took it, Was that actually a guilty mind act in terms of stealing?
No, when he decided to keep it,
Okay.
that was the guilt. Yeah, if he took the money, he still had the opportunity
To give it back.
to the bank. And
Great. So, if you are going to charge this person, the one thing that he did wrong that could lead to an offense was what? Holding on to the money. Yes? Okay. Let's see what we can do in terms of the premises. So, as we said, we have the bank and B. The objectives: to punish B, get the money back. B doesn't want to be punished, keep the money. And we want to look at stealing. Okay? One of the counter premises, of course, is that there was a permission from the bank. Where can you come up with this argument based on the facts? B wants to find a defense. And he says, I didn't do anything wrong. The bank gave me permission to take the money. Is that correct? Is that true? What can you use?
He believed he had permission.
Yeah, one thing is that he believed that. But is that enough to escape punishment? Yes.
I don't believe it's enough to escape punishment because sure he believed he had he may have sort of, I don't know whether logic that he believed he had
So
permission.
that's what I'm after.
But the thing is that he said knowing that there were no funds in it, so he already knew he did not have permission right from the get-go, so therefore there was no permission. It was a fault with the machine.
All right. Okay. Fault with the machine. Just hold on. We just discussed another case that's Teresa Lawson, right? Teresa Lawson. We said that the issue there was what? With the Woolworths. The Woolworths problem. What happened there? Why was it? There was no counter signature. So it was a systems problem. Would she be able to say that it's not my fault because you gave me permission to do so?
She is responsible for that money.
So take that out. Can you now say that I'm not responsible? Why you are not responsible? Because you designed the system this way. What's the system here?
To take up to $200.
So the bank decided, okay, we're going to have this sort of safety kind of feature that if this goes offline, because you are our valid customer, you know, we're still going to give you the money as long as you have a card and you put in the card and you put in the correct PIN. We'll give you the money. So can you now turn around and say, I'm not responsible for the system, not like Teresa. I got permission from you? Okay. That's the argument he's using there. Okay? He's saying, even if you say I've stolen, I would say you permitted this to happen. Would you buy into that argument?
Yes.
Yes and no. Yes for why?
People are bound to go to the bank thinking, I've only got X amount. You find that you have more in there. There you go. I must have forgotten about this. It's another belief that this still is your money.
So you are arguing subjectively that he believed it. He actually believed this money was his because he doesn't know how much is left. Okay, let's park that here. Why no? Or someone else?
I think it's kind of similar to like if you get overpaid by Centrelink, you still have to pay them that money back, even though because you are not entitled to that overpaid amount of money. And it's the same thing that happens in a business. If you get overpaid by a business, you still have to pay that amount back.
All right, so someone says it's common practice if you are overpaid by mistake, you have to give it back. Now, based on the facts, which argument do you think is stronger, the yes argument or the no argument? Based on whether B can succeed in arguing that the bank gave them permission.
I think it's within reason.
Based on the facts, would you say which one is stronger? The argument that B had permission from the bank or B did not have permission from the bank?
B had permission.
So this is the yes answer. B had permission. And your argument was based on the fact that what? You did not know how much you had in the bank.
It was just a system of belief.
Okay. But our scenario is telling us what? that B knew that there was no funds in the bank. If we, yeah,
How exactly did he know? When did he last check?
okay, so the account is closed now for 4 months, okay?
I didn't read the quota.
Okay, so you see, now this is very good because keep in mind that it is the facts, even in a courtroom. If someone brings a fact, of course, in the courtrooms, we have to agree on the facts. And as you go to appeal, the facts are already known. There's no new facts, okay? Because you will always appeal not on the facts, but on the law. In the exam, make sure that you read your scenario more than once. The scenario for your exam is going to be definitely longer than this, okay? So take the time to read it carefully. So you probably think that maybe the no answer is a bit stronger, simply because of the fact that this has been now for 4 months. Most likely, yeah, this means that he knew that there are no funds in that bank. But for fun, he decided just to put the card and see what happens. Still, there is no problem. The problem, as we said, once the money came out, still no problem. Took the money, still no problem, but didn't give it back. If the next day you would go and give it back to the bank and say, look, you know, this was a mistake, so that's fine. And that's what the bank wants, just give us back the money. All right. Okay, so stealing. What are the elements of stealing? Okay. Now, as we said, stealing is one of the sections in the criminal code. For our purposes, you can elementize that the first one, there was a property, here the $200, capable of being stolen. The second element, that this thing is owned by the person named as owner in the indictment. Okay. Of course, this is something that you might not end up having an indictment for because it's just $200. Okay. So this is the bank. And the third element, there was a taking without the consent of the owner. This is the problem. Yeah, if you're going to look at, okay, without the consent of the owner, that is, the accused B must have actually moved it or actually dealt with it by some physical act without the owner's consent. The taking was with fraudulent intent, so dishonestly, that is, with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of the thing. Based on this, the legal issues are not the first or second elements. Remember, we said ILAC requires you to identify the legal issues. The first I is legal issues. Where do you get the issues from? You get them from the elements. Now we looked at the 3 elements. Based on what we just discussed, there's no tension or issue really, or problem, making the fact that the property is a thing capable of being stolen. There are no strong arguments to the contrary. So you don't have to worry much about that. The second thing, that this is owned by the bank. You know that the money is owned by the bank. So these things are not going to give us issues if you are going to argue. The one that's going to give you an issue, based on the facts, remember, arguments relate to facts, is the third one. And it's an argument or it's an issue because without the consent of the bank. So the accused must have actually moved it or actually dealt with it by some physical act without the bank's consent. So you have to prove that there was an element of fraud, this dishonesty or intention. And that will always go around taking the money, not giving it back. For our purposes, as I said, for the final exam, most likely than not, the final exam will not have a criminal law question. Okay? Because you are business students and I don't want to really, go into criminal matters in that sense. So most of the questions in part B of the final exam are really going to be something around maybe torts or maybe contracts. Even maybe agency. But the way you approach those questions is exactly the same. You have to identify what the premise is. You have to identify what the elements are. And where is that going to come from? From your notes, hopefully. It's an open book exam. And once you see the question with the facts, you can decide where the issues are, and then you put most of your writing on the issues. Okay? Okay, so this is more about what happens when this thing occurs. Possible defenses. So this thing includes things like property or thing is not capable of being stolen. This will not apply in our case. B, had the consent of the owner, maybe because of the way the system was structured, i.e. the way you can use the ATM, or B, mistakenly thought they had the consent of the owner. So you could say, I by mistake thought that I have your consent. But is this a strong argument? Especially after you took the money and you kept it. Especially knowing that this has been a defunct sort of account, closed account for 4 months. The property was abandoned by the owner, doesn't apply here, or there are certain civil or contractual problems or disputes between the parties. So sometimes something called lien could actually arise, so you can have the right by law to keep something, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about torts. Okay. Any questions so far in relation how we looked at this question? So this is really how you're going to solve the problem that will come up, or the problems that will come up in your part B of the final exam. Let's look at another question. This is again online. This is again from chapter 30, page 845. And these, of course, are available to you on the study desk. If G, now a shop manager, was short of cash during the week, she would take money from the till and replace it with a valid check the following morning. So far, do you think there's an issue here? Do you think there is an offense? Can you use a premise or a legal theory to go after G? So all they're saying now is that if she's short of cash during the week, she would simply take the money from the till and replace it again with a valid check, the following morning. So she's borrowing from the till, uses the money. Once she gets money, she puts the money back. So, yes?
Usually if it's in retail or something like that, usually they sort of count up all the money at the end, and then if they find that there's money missing, then they will report it. So that's probably where it would become a bit of an issue. So she would have to actually tell somebody that money would be missing and it would be wrong.
Let me rephrase my question. Is there any stealing so far? We are just on the first sentence. Is there stealing? Someone says yes, there is stealing. Why do you think there is stealing? How do you start, please?
It's not her money to take in the beginning. Like if she's replacing it, it's not hers to take. It's the shop.
So what do you think we need to do in order for us to ascertain whether that sentence is stealing or not? You start with what? You start with the facts or something else? Every time you see a legal theory, what do you do? The first starting point is what? I said stealing. So what do you need to do now?
You need to make sure that you have the intent to actually steal, like if you intended to it.
Okay, so people, every time we talk about any legal theory, so we have to always go back and look at the elements. Okay? Always remember, if someone asks, is this stealing? How do you answer that question? Well, let's look at the elements. Let's look at the elements. There's a property. What is the property in this case? It was the money in the till. We don't know the exact amount. Is a thing capable of being stolen? Is that money capable of being stolen? This element is made. Okay, we need all of them to get stealing. You have to have all three. Second, this thing, which is the money in the till, is owned by the person named as the owner in the indictment, or basically it belongs to the shop. Is this element made? So, if we make the third element, then she has stolen. Let's look at the third element. Taking without the consent of the owner. In this case, was there any consent by the owner that she would take that money and put it back?
Reading the full question.
No, not the full question, the first sentence.
It doesn't mention any consent or asking.
Okay. Does it make any difference if she takes the money and keeps putting it back? Why? Because we said that what you need is consent. It doesn't matter whether the consent is that you take the money and don't give it back, or take the money and give it back. You are doing something without consent. Okay? You have taken property. It doesn't matter whether you put it back or not. Okay? Look, So they must have moved the property, taking it from the till, okay, without the owner's consent. Was the taking in this case fraudulent, i.e. dishonest? Okay. Why do you think it's dishonest? No consent? But what does it say after that?
Like, the taking has to be with fraudulent intent. She intended to replace it with more, so there was still intent to actually not commit fraud in that respect.
So,
The final sentence is the real clinger where it
Yeah.
says, with the intent to permanently deprive the owner. She intended to replace it, so therefore it doesn't, she wasn't going to permanently deprive the.
yeah, so based on our definition, based on these elements, the last one says you are acting fraudulently if you what? If your intent, you have the intent to permanently deprive the shop from the money in the till. Was that her intent? G's intent? No. So, do you still think that she has been stealing on the first sentence?
I think it needs to be a bit more discussed to it.
Okay.
Rather than just a yes or no to what.
So that's all I'm asking for. In the exam, don't go, jumping. Because if you jump, you're not going to have the same sort of flow of ideas, to argue or convince someone with your arguments. So be careful of the structure. Okay? Always go through the elements and then argue which one of these is the issue, and then argue after that whether there is stealing or not.
Do
Okay?
they not count the till at the end of the day
Yes, absolutely. I'm just,
for
yeah.
falsification?
We saw what happened with Teresa Lawson, right? Were there people there counting the payroll? No, because they didn't require someone to countersign. So sometimes, actually, how many of you actually work at a McDonald's or a Hungry Jack or some of these fast food restaurants? Okay. So if you are a manager there, what are you given? You are given a till, basically, a certain amount of money at the beginning of your shift, right? And at the end of the shift, it has to be counted, including receipts. Yes or not? So, at the end of your shift, you have to balance how much you were given, plus how much you sold, and how much more money should be in the till. All right? So far, so good? Okay. Can you beat this system? Can you steal? Yes, I know, because I work there as well. What can you do? What do people do if they try to steal as managers there? Sorry? Throw out the receipts, so they could say, we did not actually sell that much. But what's the problem with this scheme? Yes?
Sorry. People would realize that, let's say if I was working in a hardware store, people would realize that some of the stock would be missing, and they'd be like, okay, well, when was this purchased? And therefore, they wouldn't be able to find that receipt and the accountability of when that was purchased.
So, later on, you have to do what? You have to take stock at the end, the auditing at the end of the year, and that's when they discover these things. Yes?
With McDonald's, being a manager there, you have a safe count at the start of your shift, which has to be at $3,000, and then you have the previous manager's deposit, which is the money that goes to your bank, that you have to count. If you were to steal, you would just bank your deposit down and then act like you can't find it, which happens a lot. Like we always lose money.
So that's one way of doing it. Yeah, there are many ways actually. Yes, what else?
A crew person's draw is down when they bring it in. Like you can't really write that because it's all computerized. All the tills, like all the amounts that come from the tills go straight to the computer. So you have to match the tills to the computer amount. It doesn't matter whether you throw out the receipts or not.
Yes. Anyone wants to add to that? So my point is, you are business students, right? So you are not going to really go and prosecute people, but you might become managers, and then you have to remember this. There are always loopholes in these systems. You can beat them. It doesn't matter whether it's 50 billion or at a McDonald's. Okay? Sometimes people use refunds. Sometimes people used to use refunds, and somehow you can actually use these refunds in order for you. All right. Well, I'm not going to teach you how to steal, right? I'm just teaching. Okay. So the parties again, you have again the prosecution of the state versus G. Let's just continue reading first the question. So it says, on Friday evening, just before closing time, she took $100 from her employer still, as usual, intending to repay it on Monday morning with a valid check. Does it matter that you are taking cash and giving it back as a check? Is that the...
It can affect your, from statistics, it can affect your company's asset and liability ratio.
Yes, but from the definition of stealing.
Liquidity and stuff.
Definition of stealing. Is this the same property? So, the $100 bill that you've taken out, or the number of bills you've taken out, are they exactly the same bills that you're going to put back in? Okay, does that matter?
I feel like it does. Like they may be the same value, but that there is kind of like saying, okay, I can steal $500, but I'll give you a $500 game console to make up for it.
Okay.
It kind of is like, well, that doesn't really.
Okay. Is the property the same? That's my point.
No.
You have taken something and you put something back. In your mind, this is the same thing, the same property?
I think like people coming to say for work all the time, they say, oh, can I change this 50 to 20 and a 10? And you go, yes, so you just take it.
So her argument is we do this all the time. Some people ask for change, and you change the bills for them. So that's good. So if she took $100 bills and put back $100 bills, it's pretty much the same. What about the check then? If someone gives you a check and it's a bank check, so you're 100% sure this is actually a valid check, would you give them $100 in return in a McDonald's or any other shop? Okay, so do you think still that she was actually putting the same thing in and out? So I'm just giving you ideas for arguments. So these things you need to, pick up. All right. However, G was dismissed on Saturday when she failed to arrive at work on time. All right. She had been given numerous warnings by her employer that she would be dismissed if she continued to arrive at work late. And then we are asked, has G committed any offense? Discuss. Let's assume we take out the last bit. No, don't talk about G, okay? Don't talk about G in particular. Who are the parties here? In the widest sense, if someone wants to take someone to court, whom is going to take whom to court?
Shop manager.
Yeah, the shop manager.
Will take... Oh, no.
Anyone? G is going to take?
Shop manager will take G.
Take G. Okay? Anyone has a problem with that?
It'll be the employer takes G because it would be it's just G as shop manager. So G is the shop manager, but it's the employer.
Okay, so the employer is going to take G. Okay. Anyone has a problem with that? What kind of premise are we talking about here? The premise we just discovered and from earlier questions, we're talking about what offense? Sorry? Theft, stealing. Okay. Is that civil or criminal law? Criminal law. In criminal law, who takes whom to court? The prosecution, the police, or the crown take G to court. So the employer has to do what? Go to court? So you have to report G to the police. And then if they think there's a prima facie case, they can charge and take them to the court. So it's going to be the crown or the prosecution or the police against G. All right, what else? Is that all? Forget the last bit and tell me in generality, what else could happen here? So the police go after G for what? For stealing. Can you refine it a bit more? What more better than stealing you could use against G? More defined. It is stealing still, but we call it fraud or embezzlement. Okay. What about anything else? What could happen here as well? So the police would take G, but what else could happen? Could be, yeah, but I'm just looking at these parties. Who could do what to whom? The police goes to G, and they want to charge her with stealing. What could else happen here?
G could hire a lawyer and argue that she wasn't stealing.
Yeah, so G is going to take whom to court? Or her employer. Because of what? Unfair dismissal. Thank you.
It wouldn't be unfair dismissal because she's wanting for her dismissal.
Yes, but that would be the premise that they would work on. Can she go after the employer or not? And what is the premise? Unfair dismissal.
The accusation.
So we're saying that they would sit down and think, can we make the elements of unfair dismissal? Just like the police is going to sit and think, can we make the elements of stealing against G? Yes?
I was going to say, she could say, oh no, they fired me because of the $100, and she could end up trying to sort of, shift the blame type thing. So almost trying to make herself appear a victim rather than the person who was, rather than sort of distracting away.
Yeah.
Failed to work on it.
Okay, it's not our issue here, but let's just say what kind of argument you're going to create to say that there could have been unjustified dismissal. Okay, so someone says, actually she could have a good reason for being late. Every time, numerous warnings? Maybe. I like that. Always remember this idea of maybe, because you want to poke again. What else can you argue on the facts?
Maybe they weren't written warnings. Maybe they just said, she could have, the employer just could have said, if you keep showing up late, you're not going to have a job to come back to. Instead of having written warnings, and then they have enough evidence to say that she was given.
So, you work, right? Some of you work. When you are late to work, what happens? They start from an informal warning, but that then is escalated to a written warning, right? But what else? What else could also be argued here? Maybe it's too simple or too silly even. But what could you argue when they say when she failed to arrive at work on time?
Dismissed on Saturday.
Saturday. So does that matter? Saturday or other working days?
If it's not a working day,
Okay, you could say she doesn't work on Saturdays. Okay. Something stronger.
She could argue that maybe she wasn't late to work.
Okay, she wasn't late to work. Something else?
She could say that she wasn't given a chance to give the money back because she was dismissed before she could be given the opportunity.
Okay, let's rephrase. I want you to pick at this and say she has been bullied. In fact, there's maybe even sexual harassment here. Wow, yes. Where do you go? What can you play with to say she has been bullied? They are bullying her. Yep, so I'm gonna try to stick unfair dismissal to her employer. What can I play with to say, actually, this is a case of sexual harassment, or even a case of bullying? Sorry? How she was warned, yeah, but what else? Numerous, that's the bullying. Because they kept doing it again, and saying, when you say bullying is not a crime, right? But bullying is something that always comes under cause of conduct, especially in workplace conditions, fair work stuff. Fair Work Act has a bullying section. Okay, what else?
I was just going to mention you could sort of use gender politics in the workplace, which I mean is really low blow, but you can always...
Bullying is about unreasonable actions. So I'm trying to argue this thing of numerous warnings was unreasonable. So what can I argue based on what I was given? That these warnings were unreasonable. Yes.
That's how it worked. Like you could have been like a single parent or something and still has to drop the kids off to school, but she has to be in a bus.
Other commitments. Do you worry about that as an employer? So, what is missing here that you can play with? What is not given to us that I can probably take and say, actually, this was unreasonable. She was being bullied. What is it that's missing? How many times she was warned? Numerous. But what else is missing? Failed to arrive at work on time. What is it that's not in your head?
The time she actually,
The time. Yes?
arrived, so she could have arrived at like
So-
9:01.
So I'm 2 seconds late, and someone's standing there and saying, "Oh, you're late." Is that reasonable? 2 seconds. 2 minutes? 10 minutes? So you could go there. You could go and look at how many numerous warnings she got and what was actually the delay. How many minutes was she late? And you could also argue, was that because of something under her control or outside her control? Not because she has something else happening, but she couldn't help it.
Maybe she takes the bus and
The bus was late. The bus was late. Why should I get fired because the bus was late? It's outside my control. Yes?
but if you know that you're like if you're on the bus and you can see that it's running late,
What do you do?
you won't work. You let them know.
So someone is saying, what would a reasonable person do? Wouldn't you SMS maybe? Yeah? The boss or the manager, I'm going to be this much late. Did she do that? We don't know. That's all I want. Or you could catch an area bus. That's what I want. I want you to go through this. This is what I call critical thinking. Critical thinking is the idea that I don't care what you tell me. I can always think of something to convince you otherwise. The devil's advocate. All right, let's continue then with what we have as far as the premises. As we said, it could be either embezzlement or fraud, so it's a form of stealing. There are counter premises, okay? This is a counter premise. It's not what we just discussed in terms of unjustified dismissal. Unjustified dismissal would be a separate premise flowing from G against the employer. Here, it's just defenses, okay? Defenses around the idea of necessity. It was necessary for me to take the money, for example. We're not talking about late. Necessary for me to take the money. Why? See? And if it's necessary, why has it been happening again and again? Okay? These are the defenses you could raise against your employer, or against actually the Crown or the prosecution. Again, as we said, there are 3 elements here. I think you would agree that the last one is the most important one. This is what you are facing in terms of punishment. Which court hears it depends again on the severity of this, the amount that has been stolen. Same thing in relation to fraud in Queensland. So one more time, just to be 100% sure, you will never be asked to go and cite any of this stuff, all right? This is not in your textbook, so I'm not going to go and tell you, you have to give me that. And I've already told you, you're not going to face any problem-solving questions in Part B of the exam, as far as criminal law is concerned. All right, that's the end of our tutorial for today, and I'll leave it there, and I'll see you next week when we start on torts. If you have questions, come and talk to me before I go. Thank you.
I have questions. Can you go back to the very first slide of the tutorial?
Yeah, just a second. Let me just finish the recording, please.